the event actually already started because as you saw people were coming in, they already started the core of the event, which is communicating and starting to talk to each other and talk to our esteemed government guests. And that's really what it's all about. It's communication. That's why we're here. So I'm going to try to be really quick and get them all up on stage here as fast as possible. So my first speaker was here. He said, Robert, I'm going to come in late. I'm not sure if I'm going to get there in time. I said, no problem. We're in the proposal business, right? That's what we do. We work on, crazy things. So I'll get someone to pick you up on the tarmac. They have a TSA badge, and they can take you right from the plane, right here, because we're kind of close. And you go, oh, good news. I was able to find an earlier flight. That's awesome. Earlier flight, no problem. I don't have to pull any of the strings. And so then the office calls me, and they says, well, they've been diverted. They had some kind of like F-16 escorts, and somebody on the plane has suspected Ebola. So he said, so he's unfortunately, but I said, come anyway, right? I said, just come. It's okay. We're all friends here. But he's actually in quarantine. So Richard Crum of the State Department is in quarantine in South Carolina. So if everybody's going that way, just say hi for the next 21 days. Yeah, so the next 21 days. But fortunately, we have 4 wonderful backups here. So I'd like to introduce. So first of all, I'm going to start. So I'd like to introduce a person who has. You'll see there's a trend here. See if you can see what the trend is. So this gentleman, after getting not just one undergraduate degree in math, but a second undergraduate degree in aeronautical engineering, all right, then went on to get advanced degrees. And then served in the Air Force, proudly serving our country, and then wanted to continue to serve and took leadership roles throughout the Department of Homeland Security, even before there was a Department of Homeland Security, at Border Protection, Border Patrol. He had 17,000 people that he was working to coordinate. And now we have the pleasure of introducing Assistant Commissioner Brokowski, who is the lead acquisition executive and lead innovation officer for the Border Patrol and Customs within the Department of Homeland Security. So please welcome him to the stage. Thank you, sir. There you go.
Oh, am I talking?
No, you can just sit down. Just sit down. All right. So next we have, fortunately, another techie like myself. She actually needs absolutely no introduction. I will have to say that although I figured there would be never a chance in a million years I'll be able to get her to be able to come here to speak with us, because we know how busy she is, right? I mean, it's tough having the #1 GWAC in the entire government, the most successful GWAC in the entire history of the U.S. government, somebody that is able to really change the way government does business. I mean, and being able to add products and partners virtually overnight. I mean, imagine, maybe she should go to like CDC or something. We need some kind of, that kind of agility innovation at CDC. But really overnight, being able to put products on a schedule so that they're available to our soldiers and citizens and the people that need to do the government's work. But I called and I said, I have this panel. I know you're really, really busy, but I know people would love to hear from you. And I didn't even have time to put down the phone or put down my mouse, called immediately back and said, not only will I come, I'd love to come and honored to come. So I'd like to welcome Joanne from Soup to the stage, please. Thank you so much.
I'm going to sing a duet.
So I had the honor of having this gentleman on my panel in Chicago, which kind of got me in this mess here, because this is an encore performance from Chicago. And he, just blew everybody away with his dedication to the cause of helping to improve communication between industry and those in the government. He has been in the acquisition business. Not only has he been in the acquisition business as an acquisition officer, chief acquisition officer, eventually having 350 contract officers working for him. And if that wasn't enough, then traveling all over the world to meet with our allies, at least they were allies at the time. It changes. they mentioned something about you, I think, when they like changed their mind and said, we're not for your friends anymore, I think, right? Just don't, but we threatened to bring you back to Afghanistan and Iraq to negotiate with them. And they said, okay, right, we'll sign. But not only was he an acquisition officer for 20 years, he was an airman in the U.S. Air Force. And we'd like to thank him for his service to the contracting industry and thank him for his service to the country. If you could kindly welcome Mr. James Black to the stage, please. And though I wanted to make sure I got as many agencies as possible covered, I knew that I wanted to get some more civilian agencies, but I also wanted to have, try to encourage people that are moving into commercial and state and local and even nonprofit to come and enjoy this wonderful dinner, enjoy being here at these events. So I was fortunate enough to find somebody that has done both before and after, not during, his tenure as the CIO of the Department of Transportation. And if you've seen what has happened during his tenure, incredible transformation, really bringing that agency, and many of the agencies followed suit, so out of what we would call the dark ages of technology into a model of efficiency. And those of you that drove here safely will see that things work pretty well. And we thank him for his service as well, and we thank him for the work he's done actually to then, after he left, to take that knowledge of the government and create a startup culture and to encourage commercial and private companies to engage and create platforms, actually much like Soup, to allow more and more people to have access to services and access to the expertise through the government. So we'd like to thank Nitin for coming here, and we'd like to welcome him to the stage. There you go. Thank you. Okay, so the first quiz question, not for our panelists, right, but for the audience, is, so what's the most important aspect of communication? Anybody? Most important aspect of communication? Listening, okay? And a corollary to that. So what's two-way, okay? And so if you walk in and before I start to listen, I need to know something before I walk in, right? Clear message, that's me. What about the audience, right? You need to know who your audience is. That's the most important thing, know who your audience, who you're talking to. So that way you can form your message, right? And then that way you can frame your listening. So that's what we're going to do here. So really quickly, if we can. Who here's, I know we have a lot of federal, so if you could just raise your hand, right? Federal, okay. How about some state and local? People do state and local. Commercial. There's a lot of people not raising their hand, so people do. Nonprofit. Okay. So how about let's go by sector. So a lot of people here are IT, right? IT folks. Okay. How about human capital? Okay, great. Training, education. All right. Healthcare. Healthcare folks here. All right. Intel. All right. Yeah, I know they don't raise their hand. That's right. Anyway, they did raise their hand. They're Intel. Logistics. Okay, great. All right, so did I leave out any sectors? Did I leave anybody out? Okay, great. So enough about me. Assistant Commissioner, so I know that you're very passionate, right, about this area, about communicating, connecting with industry. So what are some of the things that you're asked most about in terms of like how we can facilitate a better communication?
Boy.
and remember, it's only 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
We're not so much asked how we can facilitate communication. We're more asked why we don't communicate, right? I mean, because those are actually two different questions. It's an interesting thing because as we're going through procurements and our delays and all that other stuff, industry struggles with, is there someone who can tell me what the heck is going on, right? And frankly, what I've found, and you've probably found, is that the point of contact that you'll have for that piece of information is some contracting specialist or contracting officer who will either not answer your calls or won't give you an answer. And that comes from the design and the training of people who are taught to be very cautious and not to take risks. And the best way not to take risks is not to communicate. So we have these situations where as we are developing or progressing or delayed, we'll occasionally have staff meetings, and every once in a while someone, normally me, will say, by the way, have we told industry this? And you get kind of these blank looks, right? Like, what do you mean? Well, did we put in Fed Biz Ops that we were going to be 6 months beyond our schedule? Because at a certain point, you've got people hanging out there with their bid and proposal teams, spending lots of money. It might be nice to tell them that. So I don't get questions about how to facilitate. I more get questions on why won't you answer our questions? Why isn't there someone who will answer the phone? Why, when I do reach somebody on the phone, are they afraid to give me an answer? Those are the kind of questions that we get. And frankly, it has a lot to do with personalities, culture, fear, and risk-taking.
Right. So, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. So Joanne, I know that when we were setting this up, you told us how especially proud you were of how the agility that you have built into your, really a model GWAC. And to that, I'd like to announce, for those of you who haven't heard, that you received a Lifetime Achievement Award for that by the Government Contractors Association. So we're very, very proud of that, and looking forward to So in terms, what do you think has been the secret sauce of the success of SOUP?
Well, so
what ingredient, what super ingredient has been a secret?
So there's a lot of pieces to it. In fact, we get a lot of contracts that try to emulate us, and they usually, and people say, are you worried about them? I said, no, because they don't get it. They think that it's a contract, it's a clause that makes this work. For this audience, in particular, one of the keys I always say is industry involvement. When we started SOUP in '92, the three what I call the godfathers of SOUP, the guys who started the whole idea of this contract, they came from policy, procurement, and technical, and they actually came together and worked together, which was unusual enough. And one of the key elements was industry was not our enemy, industry was our partner. And so we built that continuously into SOUP. And sometimes that gets us into, we don't sit in the middle and say, government, you're always right. We sit in the middle of things and say, what is right between the two, and how can we help the information flow? So we are very agnostic about who's right and who's wrong. We just want to make sure that we get the best quality technology to our government customers at the best price. That's our key. And to do that, we need industry's partnership to help do that. And so we try to make sure that we're as involved as we can be. That's why I'm happy to be here, because the more I can talk to industry, the more I can hear about what they do, and I can bring it back into the office and make sure that we're aware of that. And I'll point out, we have with us my recently added to our staff is Ken Brown, who comes from industry, and it's very important for us to have that industry connection, that we not just be this insulated government piece. And if you do that, you can save the government money, because if I can do things that make life easier for industry, then you don't have to charge us as much for what you do. And unfortunately, sometimes, as you well know, the government doesn't understand that.
Yep, great, thank you so much. So, Mr. Black, so what changes have you seen? 20 years, having 350 contract numbers work for you. I know you're very passionate about reaching out to industry. Well, what can industry do on their side to facilitate that? What are some of your best recommendations based on what you've seen over the years?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me. I am passionate about APMP, just like I'm passionate about NCMA. Been a member for 2 years, so I'm representing the Tidewater chapter today and being here. And it's a high-energy audience, so I always enjoy what you guys bring whenever you guys get together. So I really appreciate being here tonight. But what can we bring is, I think industry, we have a very risk-adverse culture in government now, and you could say that it's always been like that. And I would say, yes, I would agree to an extent, but I would say that it's increased as we've tended to rely a little bit more on our legal departments in our procurement process and less on our business acumen from our contracting officers or our program managers and those that are working on the IPTs. So with that risk-adverse culture comes a very standoffish kind of approach to everything, right? We know when dealing with lawyers, that they tend to be very reserved. So I think in order to get around that, we need more sharing between industry and government. And so I'm not talking about necessarily communication, although that's important as well, but I'm talking about sometimes showing some of the cards that you're holding so that we can then better understand the business practices of industry. Because government does not generally house that type of information internally. The folks that, you have probably a good trade between folks coming from different departments, different companies, going back and forth. People in federal tend to stay in this federal space for a long time, right? And don't get much industry exposure. And we find that people that do get industry exposure and then come back to government, they quickly go back to industry. So we don't keep it in-house very long. So our contracting officers specifically, contract specialists, folks in the programming department, they need for you to share a little bit more information, to show a little bit more information from the cards that you hold to help them better understand how they can frame a better contract agreement.
Okay, and we'll get back to that. So then I know that one thing you're very passionate about is trying to sort of change the model, and I know that you're very active in doing that now. But before you got the opportunity of doing that, I know that you spent a lot of time with the industry while you were there. I know I was one, and there were many people here in this room were people that knocked on your door. And you explained sort of, let's turn the tables. What was it like for you sitting on the receiving end of us? And what suggestions did you have for improving that effectiveness and better use of your time?
So you're talking when I was CIO?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. So I was CIO for about 3.5 years, okay? Managed a pretty large team, so we had 3,000 employees, we had 10,000 contractors, spending about $4 billion in IT stuff, okay? On an average, I was meeting, I would say about 2 to 3 companies a day. So met 1,000 companies. Okay? It's interesting, 95% of those companies pretty much said the same thing. Okay.
Only 95? Not you told me 99. You're being
I
you're
wanted to
being
be sort of
polite
a little,
to these guys.
They all said they did great work. They were great at cybersecurity, cloud, mobility. They did great program management. They did great project management. Now, when I analyzed, so we did the portfolio stats. We have that. We did that first at DOT. As soon as I came in, I looked at my entire portfolio. I spent 6 months. And most of our projects were behind. There were issues with it. Number of projects, we didn't know why the heck we were doing them. So if I sort of looked at what the industry, the companies that were coming and telling us and their capabilities were, and if I look at what the performance was, there was no match, okay? And so that's where, as I said, and we'll talk later in the day, needed complete transformation. And I sort of went after 2 different things. One is what I call public-private innovations, and one was transformation as a service. So I was focused on these 2 things, and we started making a lot of changes. And I was there for 3.5, 4 years. When I got out, now I'm, of course, doing that from the outside. But that's basically what I found.
Right. Okay, great. And we'll try to figure out how to fix that. Right now we're just uncovering the problems. So Assistant Commissioner, I know, so you're Innovation Officer is one of your titles. I know you're very passionate about that, as we all are. But it means a lot of different things to different people. And when you say in your proposal, and a lot of people ask me this as they went around asking for questions, and I knew I shouldn't have done that because I get questions that would be too hard to answer. It says it wants this specific thing, and I'm afraid that if I'm going to, how can I be innovative with that? And if I'm innovative and they don't get it or they think it's too, what do I do? They want this right here. Where's my room for innovation? What do I do?
There is no room for innovation in that.
Okay, that wasn't what you were supposed to say.
Let's be clear about that, okay? Now, look, first of all, this term innovation, right, is the current buzzword in government. Just like TQM was a few years ago, leadership's another good one. You got a problem, we're going to solve it with continuous process improvement. You got a problem, we're going to solve it with TQM. You got a problem, we're going to solve it with leadership. What are we going to solve it with today? Innovation, right? Now, what the hell does that mean, right? Innovation is not IT. But most people in the government treat it as if that's the definition of innovation. So that's the first problem. That's the first problem, is that we have to understand what we mean by innovation. Second of all, by the time I've gotten to an RFP, if I write an RFP like that, and by the way, we've tried not to for exactly that reason, but if I write an RFP like that, there is no room for you to innovate. You had better give me what I asked for, even if it's stupid. Okay? All right?
And it actually is sometimes.
Right? Okay? All right? Because even if you know we don't know what we're doing, we think we're asking you for innovation, but our RFP doesn't say that. And I will tell you when we go into source selection, but he didn't give me what I wanted, right? And you will not win. So innovation, that is not the place to have the discussion of innovation, because once that RFP goes out that way, the only opportunity for innovation is in process innovation, not in product innovation. And if you can, in your proposal, give us some reason to believe you're going to have an innovative way to produce this more reliably, I think there's room for that, but certainly not in terms of responding to that specific action in the RFP.
Got it. Okay. So, so speaking of innovation, I know, Joanne, that's one area that you look for. You're looking for people, not maybe so much on the technology side, because it's hard to differentiate people that have the same product, but you are passionate about making sure they're serving your customers well. So what's your advice for being able to look for ways of improving the customer support that we all can give to the people that are getting products through your platform?
Okay, so I would say for one of the things that I would like to see more of from industry in that regard is, I think going along with the innovation of process, there's so much, we all just follow whatever the latest thing is, you know. And you get a whole lot of RFPs and they all say the same thing because they're all following the same thing. As both a program manager and a former technical person, no longer able to do that, I am big on innovation and trying to figure out, is there something out there that's really, really different? I'd be interested in seeing. I don't want to see the same thing, which 95% 95% of what we see is exactly the same thing everybody else has, and or in different words. But that may be okay. The other thing is while we're being innovative, also be aware that we are the government and we do move slow. But also the industry moves slow and everything moves slow. I think part of the problem with innovation is that sometimes we expect that to have an occurrence right away. I've now, and this is true, and unfortunately it's true, I'm now on a 10-year innovation cycle. If I think of something, I'm giving myself 10 years to see it actually happen. So I actually literally went back. This is a true story. I always tell people, I always tell true stories. I wanted to have chat. This was in the early 2000s. I wanted to have chat and interaction with my customers. 10 years later, I finally found a chat tool that would do what I wanted to do. And that was disappointing to me. Now I'm getting used to that. I recently, and this is now the big thing in the government, but before I think we were doing it before everybody else was, as typical, going after product categorization. I've been trying to do that for about 10 years. I finally found a company that did it, not perfectly, but so innovation maybe is not mean fast innovation, but you can start on it and hope that it gets you somewhere down the road, hopefully not always 10 years. But if you expect it to happen right away, you'll only be disappointed and not get anywhere. And then the next thing comes up, the next new thing. I think, going to your point, I always shy away from anybody who has the answer, whether it's TQM or Six Sigma or the cloud, whatever the answer is.
Mark, you forgot
that's
Six
not
Sigma.
the answer. Yes,
mention
I was
that.
waiting for Six Sigma to come
I
out.
didn't have an infinite amount of time. I could still be talking here.
ISO 9000, whatever that answer is, it's not the only answer. And I don't want to just hear that answer. I'd rather not hear those buzzwords. I'd rather hear what it actually means to do those things and what it actually ends up doing.
So what it means. So what it means to you, like how it can change
Right.
your operations, change your client's operations.
Yeah, don't just give me back the words that, the ISO words of what ISO does. Believe it or not, we're not, I think for the most part, the government people out there aren't dumb. We know what these things are, and if you just tell them, that's not innovation to us. If you tell us and especially now that it's one of these things that you're working on something and you don't, I'd rather see honesty too, because again, that innovation takes a long time. So if you say, I've innovated and I have the answer, you're probably wrong. So tell me, I'm innovating and I'm getting to the answer, then I probably want to hear more about it.
Right, so look at the journey, right? Not necessarily the journey of how you would get
The journey is so much, because the journey keeps moving. And,
right.
we were talking about, what's coming Soup 5, and there's a lot of things I'm doing with the next version of Soup, and it's because of the journey we're taking. And I just met with the Marine Corps today. I was telling them, bear in mind, when we first start this stuff, it ain't going to work very well. But stick with me, and I have a good journey to go down.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. So Jim, you mentioned risk aversion, and you mentioned that sort of that's sort of permeating a lot of what you do and a lot of what industry does as well. So any suggestions on how we can reduce that risk for the government when we're looking at a solution, looking at how to help you solve problems? Where in your process, in your RFP process, can we work with you to help reduce that perceived risk?
Right. Well, as I said in previous times to talk with you, with those that have been at the conferences, if you're waiting for the RFP to hit the street, you're already too late, right? And so really it starts at the beginning of the acquisition process. When the agency is describing the statement of need, that's when you need to be shaping that environment. That means you need to be communicating with the end user, the right client, not necessarily the one that's listed in that RFP. The right client sometimes is a completely different office or entity altogether. So you need to make sure you're influencing that department, those folks, and that those folks that you're influencing are carrying the ball all the way to the end zone. What often happens is halfway through the procurement process, as soon as they get funding, they throw the requirement back over to the contracting department, who is left to make all the decisions because they've been left to a contracting officer to decide on. But they haven't agreed to a process, a contract type, an evaluation method at any point before that, and therefore now it's left to the contracting officer to decide, and they're going to go with the least risky scenario or the path of least resistance in some cases as well, depending on how fast we need to get it awarded. So it's really about shaping it at the entire acquisition process. You're going to be talking to, there is no one source or person to talk to that's going to influence that whole process. It's probably several clients that you're going to have to communicate with and not rely on just one. If that one takes vacation or leave or whatever, then you're completely out of luck, right? And now you're waiting for the RFP to hit the street. And like I said, once it hits the street, as you all know, you're familiar with the industry, you're already too late. You can't shape anything after that. So that would be my advice.
Great. Okay, perfect. And so Nitin, I know you said there's a line of people outside your office coming in to help shape those RFPs with you. And you said that generously 95% of them are the same. So what can we do to better prepare to make that engagement, that short time that you have, meaningful for both you and for them?
Yes, so I think change needs to happen on both sides. And so let me first talk about the change that the government needs to do. And I really tried to push for this when I was CIO. And obviously when you're trying to do this against such a big bureaucracy, all kinds of interesting discussions come out, and many times the discussions and what points people get are right. But what I would first say is, and it goes back to the discussion about innovation, if you put out a statement of work, you meaning government, if you put out statement of work, you're already by defining, you're sort of saying step by step what you want done, okay? As soon as you tell that, you have left all choices of innovation are absolutely gone, because you've already told you exactly what you need to do. So the first thing I would say is, wherever possible, government should move to statement of objectives. They should lay out what the heck they want as a result and let the industry figure it out. Because now I can start seeing who is really the clever guy there who's coming out with really the cutting-edge solutions. So that's something which I would say. And I have a write-up, actually. I wrote an article in Federal Times last week, which talks about fresh approaches to IDIQs and GVACs. I think I have some copies outside. You should sort of look at that, because I was sort of going out and saying where the government goes wrong. So I've got a whole bunch of places where the government goes wrong. So that's one part. Now going back to the industry, here's the problem. If you're going to come out and meet a CIO, I mean, that's what people think. They think you meet a CIO, something big is going to happen, okay? I can tell you I've been meeting so many people that I don't even know who the heck I met yesterday. I mean, it's that difficult. So unless you come out with something really mind-blowing, okay, it's not going to register with me. I'm not going to take time to sort of figure out what can be done with it, okay? So again, going back to innovation, I mean, what I think is a three-step process. All innovation does is create excitement, okay? And excitement doesn't really lead to any damn thing. So the next thing you need to look at collaboration. How do you take that innovation and go into collaboration? But ultimately what I'm looking at is transformation. I want to look at how I can consistently transform my agency to be the best. Okay? And that means I have to hammer away at all kinds of folks with innovative ideas and let them persist and let them think and let them go out. And we started a program like this at DOT called the TELUS Session, where we would get transformative technologies and started introducing them to DOT. And when we initially started doing that, people said I was crazy. I mean, who the hell is going to come for those events? In 3 years when we left, we used to have 200 people in that auditorium. There are people from other agencies coming there because they were consistently understanding transformative technologies. It's not that we needed all of them, but the fact that they understood what technologies were there, how those companies were thinking, what could be done with it, could be a big opportunity. So I would say start looking at transformative technologies and how you really integrate that within your proposals, within your ideas. That's what you need to look at to create a key what I call vectors of differentiation. You can't differentiate on one spot. You have to continue differentiating with others, and that difference needs to increase over time. So that's what I would suggest.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. So actually, that leads us nicely back to the Assistant Commissioner in terms of differentiation. You told us that if you tell us that, how ridiculous it is, doesn't matter how stupid it is, we do it, exactly as you say. So if we're all doing the same thing, exactly like you say, so how do we differentiate? Where's our wiggle room in there? And what are you looking for? What suggestions might you have?
Right. So now we're talking about proposals, which is different than the conversation we've had to this point. So let's make that very clear. How do we evaluate proposals is different than how I evaluate somebody who comes to visit me, because I also have a visit a day.
Yeah, I'm getting them
And
slowly,
okay.
down.
So now we're talking about proposals, and presumably we're talking about a best value proposal. That's sort of implied in what you're talking about, because if we're talking about something else, then we'll get
to that.
Okay.
Yeah, that was on everybody's hit list. Yeah.
Well, it's important to define terms like innovation.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a best value proposal, right? So how is that? What are we looking for there? Well, we're looking for you to deliver something that we asked for, and what makes a best value proposal distinguished is first of all, relative strengths and weaknesses. So where you do have the opportunities to tell me why your system does something better or makes my job easier. Now, this is something I think, though, that you've got to understand about evaluations compared to this conversation. Evaluations are really very anal retentive. The discussions that we've had here have been very open, right? We can have these chats. But now we're reading a proposal, and we are very strictly, if we're doing it right, which we don't always, but we try, if we're doing it right, we are very strictly reading exactly what you said. We are trying not to read between the lines. We are probably not giving you the benefit of the doubt if there's an ambiguity, unless we're doing something wrong because we happen to like you and want you to win anyway, in which case if we get caught, we'll be stopped from that. But we're reading these very strictly, and we are now going to take what you offer that is different from somebody else. So let me just use an example. It's on my mind because of some things I have. I want a camera, right? Some of you will offer me a standard definition camera. Some of you will offer me a high definition camera. Both of you offered me a camera. Both of you gave me something. And so now I see a distinction between those two things. And now I have to assess whether I care. Now, you may think I should care. But what's important is whether I think I care, right? So we go through all of that, we make those conclusions, and we do that separately from price. And we will rank 1 through N the quality of proposals based on essentially relative strengths and weaknesses and risks on things like, did I really think it mattered that I had a high definition camera compared to a standard definition camera? Now, how do I make that decision, by the way? And this is where many proposals fail. I make that decision based on my assessment of how that will make my job easier or harder. So one of the things that we really have challenges with is I don't think folks understand how to make what they're offering us connect with how we perform our mission. This is very important homework, which, by the way, should be done before the RFP ever goes out on the street, right? Because if you don't give me a reason to believe that your high-definition camera or your 35 megabits per second instead of 25 if you don't explain to me why I should believe that makes my job better, it has no value to me. There is no automatic tautological value. There's only value that allows us to produce a mission impact, that allows my people to work more effectively, more efficiently, more reliably. So that's the kind of thing you want to write in your proposal. Now, having said that, now I'm off over here, I'm evaluating price. So now I got this 1 through N list of the merit of proposals. But now I got price. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the parts of that 1 through N list where as I go from highest to lowest, the price goes down. Right? So sometimes you get 5. Best one is $100. Second best one's $105. Second best one's automatically out. Lower value, higher price, automatically out. I don't need to spend any more time on that one. Third one is $85, right? So I get the best one at $100, the second best one, or the third best one actually at $85. Now I got to do a trade-off. You're looking for, when you come to talk to me, you're looking for, could you please show me the computer program you put that in that spit out whether the difference between those two things was $15 or not. That's what you're looking for. I mean, I've been through enough of this where I don't think you get that somebody like me is sitting saying, it's worth it to me. Now, it's a little more structured than that, okay? It is a little more structured than that. But frankly, if I'm the source selection authority, it's my subjective, hopefully rational, competent judgment, period, end of discussion. And there's really nothing you can do about that. Okay? I mean, you know, when you look at protest, that usually is a basis of protest because that's the classic best value protest. It couldn't possibly have been worth $15 more for that little dinky thing that they gave you, right? But all I have to do is say it is because that little dinky thing allows my mission to be performed this much better, and that is extraordinarily important to me. That's why we go back to the connection to the mission, right? So what do you do about that? Well, you have to do some business intelligence and try to understand who's likely to be making that decision, because we won't tell you, that's source selection sensitive. You need to do some business intelligence. So, yes, you can make those kinds of distinctions. You have to compare them to cost-benefit, and you have to try to guess whether who's sitting in my seat is likely to think it is more or less. You know, one of the things that always intrigued me is how much you know about your competitors' proposals, right? It really is really amazing. You know what they're bidding, you know, because we'll get proposals that'll say things. They won't say like, and when, you know, Acme's camera sucks, they won't say that, but they say, well, and if somebody happens to propose to you a camera that does this, and you're looking at the other proposal, gee, son of a pop, how'd they know that, right? And you know the price, right? Those are the things you need to think about. Those are the things that make distinctions in the proposal.
Right. Okay, great. Now you see why I asked him to come, right? I mean, that was a no-brainer when I got the call. I said, that's the first person I called. So I know, Joan, you were nodding your head in agreement in terms of what you're looking for and how you weigh all these things. Very, very complex. So what are some insights and some words of wisdom that you can provide?
So I don't think I call it very complex. I think it's very straightforward. When you get to the RFP, as stated, the RFP tells you, don't try to guess what it tells you. Read what it tells you, and don't say, well, I've done a proposal before, and I've done this, so I'll just do that. And it doesn't matter if you've done a proposal before and you did this. If the proposal says, these are the 5 things to do those 5 things, and do them as best you can, and understand that when we go to evaluate things, we don't have a lot of wiggle room ourselves. You know, we don't. I know you all think that we have these little, guessing. I don't know what you all think we do, but we have to go through and say, here's what we asked for, How does this match up with what you told us? We don't go and say, we didn't ask for this, but let's just look at it anyway, because our lawyers would beat us up if we did. And they'll say, no, did you ask for that? No, we didn't, so it doesn't matter. We did ask for this. Did you respond? How did you respond to that? It's not very complex. Don't overthink it. Look at the RFP, do what the RFP asks, respond as fully as possible to those points. If you want to go beyond that, that's fine, but understand, if you go beyond it and it's not related, that's really cool, but you know what? It wasn't what we asked for. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, let me just add to that, because that's important. You're depending on some evaluator and oftentimes what happens is they really love it. And I've been the source selection authority. We love these guys because they did this. And I will say, show me where in the evaluation criteria it allowed you to credit that, right? No, but we love it. Now, that's not to say there isn't a place to credit it. But what I guess I'm suggesting to you is when you write your proposal, point to what you think is the part of the evaluation criteria that allows us to give you credit for it. That helps. Because sometimes these things are strengths that are not directly on point. But to be fair, we write our evaluation criteria generally enough so we have some wiggle room for those kinds of things if we can find it. So if you think you're offering us something that addresses a particular thing we said we're going to evaluate, don't assume we catch that. Help us recognize that, and that can strengthen your proposal.
Right, excellent. And then go beyond that then and say not just the what, right? Because that's what most of us do in our proposal. Most of what we do is the what. This is what we're delivering. This is what we're going to do. This is what customer service looks like. But talk about why. Like, why does it help you do your job and your mission? So then take it to the next level.
Two things. Why is it helping me, and what part of my evaluation, my section L and section M, do you think it counts against? Because if we don't recognize that, we won't care that you bid it.
Right, excellent. So I know, and so you're nodding your head, Jim, and I know we talked about engaging and understanding the mission, and that's very, very important. A lot of us here are very passionate about that. A lot of us were some of your customers before, as we said, and we go into industry from government. But it gets very complex in who the actual end customer is. And many times in your procurements, the end customer is maybe not the program manager, is nowhere in the RFP that you can see, nowhere in the contracting office. He's out in the field, he's out in Afghanistan and Iraq. So how, and sometimes it's a secondary customer. You may be purchasing something from us and selling it to another service, selling it to another agency. So how do we get a feeling, how do we get a pulse on that mission, on the end user, in those complex environments where you've been, Afghanistan, Iraq? How do we and bring that in to our responses?
You've probably asked the toughest question of the day now, because I don't have a good answer for how do you reach the ultimate end user when there's so many layers between us and them. Often, even the contracting shop is many layers removed from the end user. So it's about asking the right questions that kind of lead you down a path to get to closer proximity. But I don't know if, particularly when they're geographically removed, that you'll ever get to where you most want to be without doing much of that market intelligence that Mark was talking about. As he said, you know a lot about your competitors, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, but you don't spend a lot of time figuring out who you need to talk to. And I don't think I'm going to be able to answer that question directly here today. But it will take not just taking no, or not just taking allowing for unanswered emails or responses to requests for industry. It'll take some more digging. It will take some more resources to find out who do I need to talk to so I can get an answer. So I think that's probably the best answer I can provide, because that's a very difficult question to answer, because there is no one button to push. There is no one resource out there. But I would like to kind of piggyback on what Mark said about highlighting your strengths in your innovation, if it's an innovative approach. The first thing you need to do is kind of clearly articulate to us where you're meeting our basic requirements, and then through a wiring diagram, kind of lay it all out together for us, do through the work breakdown structure, and show us specifically, if it's resumes we're asking for, how are we going to benefit from that particular individual's resume and what they're contributing specifically to the mission that you're bidding on. You know, just a very strong resume doesn't really sit well if we don't know how that's going to make our mission better or easier or faster or cheaper. So really working on articulating that level of detail and wiring it all the way down to the work breakdown structure would allow those that are on technical evaluations who may not have as strong a background as your technical writers have and kind of better understanding where that innovation really lies, indifferent to what the basic requirement is that we stated. So that's where I would like probably highlight that fact.
So, John, you had a comment?
So to go off some of what you just said, you don't actually have to talk to people nowadays. And I don't like to talk to people, so because I don't have time. People say, well, can I give you 15 minutes? I think I once calculated it would take me 4.5 months to talk to everybody that has items on my contract, even if it's only 15 minutes each. So no, I don't talk to everybody. But I have a website, and we all have websites. And you think this is pretty simple, but one of my favorite stories is I had an industry person send me an email saying, I'm the most wonderful person in the world. I have the most wonderful stuff.
You were the same people that he had,
yes,
right?
it's amazing. And I poured over your website. Tell me more about SWEP. You don't even know how to say the name, spell the name of the program that you're trying to deal with, and you're trying to impress me. So don't just look at it quickly, but really understand there's a lot of information out there on websites. And also, I would say, pay attention to the incumbent. This is not a true example, but I'm trying to think of how to explain this without getting myself into procurement trouble. If you were going to NASA and you wanted to bid on a contract, and the current contract holder was an HR-centric company, and you're a technology company, you might want to think about maybe they're looking for an HR company, because that's what the incumbent does, and coming in and saying, oh, but I'm this company isn't going to get you anywhere. The incumbency, what do they do? Why are they currently there? What is their business model? Not that you have to follow it, but it gives you a sense of what they are then doing for the agency. Maybe just because it's NASA, it's not technical. Maybe it's HR, or vice versa. So there are ways of doing that business intelligence. You don't have to talk to anybody to do that. You can just do some digging, do some research on the web, do some research in FPDS. Not always perfect, but does have, USAspending.gov has amazing stuff out there that tells you some idea of what's going on with that business.
Great.
But I'm going to disagree with part of that, because you will not get on a website how significant it would be to, for example, a Border Patrol agent if they have an Xbox controller compared to a drop-down menu to control their camera. And you can't tell which one they prefer. And those are the kinds of things that are going to make distinctions in who wins a proposal. The problem with getting to those operators, this is what industry typically tries to do. They hire retired people as consultants, and then when they are told they were not best value because we didn't like your approach as much as somebody else, they have this shocked look on their face. How can that be? Because I had Fred Smith, who's the former chief of the Border Patrol. Of course it has to be the right choice, right? And actually I find that industry is actually surprised to find out that, yeah, but Fred Smith's kind of stale. It's a good place to kind of start. And by the way, no one person, because it's not going to be one person going to make this advice to the one person making the decision. It's going to be a group of people, right? The other thing is this. Different organizations have different ways of handling this. There are some organizations where the contracting office will do everything in their power to stop you from talking to anyone but them, and then when you talk to them, they'll make sure not to give you any information, right? Going back to the first thing. Which means, again, this is a business, you have to figure out who your allies are in each individual organization. Who are the people that will help you get that information? Most organizations have them. Okay? You need them also at a high enough position in the organization so that when the contracting office, if you happen to have one of those, and by the way, ours, CBP is very inspired HCA. We don't have this issue. But I know of organizations that do. No, seriously, we don't. We don't. Some of our people are a problem, but the HCA himself is great. The person you find who will help you through that has to be high enough up in the pecking order to overwhelm that natural tendency to shut down discussions. Now, there's a good reason for that shutdown, because when we get far enough into a procurement, I can't allow one or another of you to have more access than another, because then I will have problems when we get to the protest period. So it's all about timing, but frankly, if you want to get to operators, and you need to get to operators, you know, this is not about, when we're talking about, you know, buying cameras and radars and unattended ground sensors and those kinds of things, you need to get to operators. You need to find an ally in the acquisition community who will help you do that. There's no other way around that.
Great. Okay. Nitin, allies. So how would somebody go about
Well,
looking for allies?
Robert, if I could just add on, because you made an excellent point there, is that you know, if your contracting officer is your only point of contact that you can get any kind of information from or any communications from, then ask them, are they getting with the operator? Are they getting with the folks that are wearing it, using it every day, implementing it, whatever, and ask them to kind of get out a little bit as well, because you'll find that sometimes they're very far removed and they need to have a better understanding of what that true requirement is. So if that's the only way, then maybe try that avenue.
Great. And then some advice.
You're asking, I didn't get your question.
I mean, you're nodding your head, so if you want to leverage off of what they were talking about in terms of connecting with your end users, or again, how to best understand how to package what we can offer. I know you talked about problem solving. You talked about when we go in, know your problem and tell me how to solve it, and that's it. 5 minutes, if that.
Yeah, so I want to comment on a couple of things from my angle of CIO in terms of source selection. And again, this might be what I sort of saw. It might be different in different agencies, but typically, you know, you put out an RFP, you'll get some 25 proposals. 15 of them will be completely crap. They'll just be technically not okay. They would have had, you know, instead of DOT, they would have copied and pasted DHS everywhere or something like that. And like, you know, that's a non-starter, so you're just gone. Then you're sort of left with, you know, some number of proposals there. Some of them are pretty ordinary. There's nothing special there, so it's really not there. So the competition really is between, you know, a few normally that sort of is sitting there. Again, when you're looking at best value, you know, not looking at other kinds of LPT or other things. And, you know, one of the things which you need to realize is the source selection committee sometimes gets influenced by the circumstances that they are involved in, and you know what I'm talking of. So let's say you're doing a software development project. Let's say it's a big software development project. RFP has gone out. All the requirements are there. Somewhere there's a small requirement there about cyber, making sure that it's properly developed. And you know, you put few lines on it, and that's what you've put in. And let's say DOT has had a big cyber issue a month down the line, earlier, okay? And now everybody is really...
After you put the proposals in.
Yeah, you put the proposal in, you know, and DOT put out an RFP, let's say, or somebody put out an RFP, and you know, there's a software development project, and you put out a proposal, you wrote something in, and it's gone, and between that time and it reaches the source selection, maybe a major cybersecurity breach happens. Okay? And now everybody is under the gun to make sure that cybersecurity is really well taken care of. Okay? Now, you get those 5 proposals, and one person by chance has put in a huge amount of stuff on cybersecurity. The source selection, oh my God, I really think this lady understands, you know, what she's doing, because it's already there. Okay? Now it's just up there. So you need to sort of start anticipating some of those things. The second thing I will say is, because all proposals sort of look similar, okay, it really becomes a complicated factor of trying to figure out why somebody is better than the other. And one of the things that I've found is, again, I go back to transformative technologies, because you can't really put something different which can be that attractive in terms of differentiation. But if you add a couple of transformative technologies, and as again, you know, as is mentioned here, you can't just put a technology and hope that the guys evaluating understand. You need to relate, saying why this is transformative, what recurring problems are you solving, how does it relate to that proposal, where exactly it gets evaluated. You know, you have done some of that, and you have gone there earlier, you know, before all of this happens, and you have shown some of those transformative technologies, so they have a clue that, oh, I know that exists, I've seen that. If you have done all of that work, you get an immediate impact. You get an immediate impact because all it needs is a couple of people to latch on to that particular differentiation. And nobody else can get it because only you have it. But again, just putting it out doesn't help. You need to actually have, there needs to be a system here of finding the technologies, introducing them, educating them, integrating them properly, showing them towards result. There's a whole step-by-step process that needs to be done. And I'm talking mainly from IT point of view. So some of those things are very, very critical. I mean, you have to make your proposal look different, better, and connected. And I'm not sure that many times we see that.
Right, right. Although we all say we are. And actually, I heard somebody say, "Oh, you like my cyber thing?" Yes, there's the person who wrote that was in the audience here. I'm going to steal this from you. So we're going to, although I would like to think they answered most of our questions, and they answered a lot. We appreciate it incredibly. But I think there might be a few more in the audience. So I got some in my back pocket here from wandering around and talking to you guys before. But I'd like to open up the floor for people that might have some questions. Raise your hand first.
Hi. Hi, guys. I'm Alexa Choi. I work for Technique. My question is actually for Joanne. I know that you recently awarded Soup 5, and you looked over...
Okay, no.
Sorry.
Away from specifics.
Okay, you recently awarded Big GWAC, and...
We're
we'll
talking in general how to improve the process
nameless.
in general. Yeah.
And I was wondering, as you were looking through those hundreds of proposals, what were maybe 5 things that stood out to you?
Yeah, that's right. So I apologize. So no specific procurements. We're just trying to improve. Yeah, no specific procurements. Yeah, no specific procurements. Just, yeah.
Hi, my name's Angela Snyder. I'm a proposal manager at Task. My question's for Nitin.
Yeah, but nice try.
Sorry, my question's for Nitin. Just on the last point that you made about having proposals look better to you. There's a thought in industry, I think, that proposals are not often read, but they're scored or skimmed. When you open that binder and you look at the first page, can you talk about some visual elements or some aspects of the proposal visually that will help us stand out from our competitors, aside from the written word?
Yes, so I would say different people are looking at different things. Different people are looking at different things. And I'll sort of go back and sort of talk about rather than any specific proposal, I'll sort of talk about IDIQs and GVACs and those kind of things because that's where, most of the government business seems to be going. And so you sort of need to win those. And one of the things that I used to always look at, because these were, open-ended contracts that one would use for the next 4 or 5 years. And we didn't know exactly what kind of task orders would come in. So one of the critical things for me was to look at what that team was that was coming out and actually presenting to us. It's surprising that most of the teams that are put together are never explained as to why the heck these guys got together to do what the heck they are doing. So if you're in sports, you're trying to look at the team to make sure that the team is going to win. Most of the time it looks like somebody got together for a couple of drinks or something like that. Say, okay, let's team up. We'll put this thing together. That's what it seems to happen. So I, from an IT perspective, was looking at the team. What did I want the team to do? I wanted strong capacity. So I wanted them the capacity to go out and do complex things. I wanted the capability to do that. I wanted the consistency that they could do this. Okay? And I wanted to see that vector of differentiation. As I reported to the secretary. The secretary was always asking me, how are we doing in comparison to others? Okay, there's always that competition going. I want to go out and show that I'm doing something, or for my agency, which is way cooler than other people. Okay, so now I'm depending on contractors to come out and do that. So the contractors need to go out and show how exactly this is going to be done. So some of those things will be done, and again, there's the article outside that you might want to see. It's also in Federal Times. It goes step by step of what kind of things should be done. But a couple of things you need to do, in my opinion. You need to go out and make sure that you have, some kind of vendor there which has commodity, or I shouldn't say commodity, but cutting edge commercial off-the-shelf solutions that can be brought in quickly. because that can reduce cost of the overall system and make you unique, so you need to look at that. You need to have systems there, and I'm talking of IDIQ kind of stuff, which can improve the procurement process, because that would work a lot. You should have products there which can improve the HR process. So there are a number of things that you can do to make your proposal very unique. And I surprisingly did not see that. It was the same old, trying to write some different things here and there. That's what I was seeing. And the companies that came out and did that consistently got branded differently, and they won a lot. And so that's what I would suggest. And I'm talking more from what perspective I saw, maybe different in other agencies.
Right, thank you. Yes, I hear contracting officers, they say, don't tell me why you're the same, tell me why you're different. Yep. That's what they tell me. Commissioner, do you have one to?
Yeah, talking about the first part of the first of all, recognize this proposal is going to be split up and different people are going to look at it. When I get to the first page of the proposal, what I want to do is get past it as quickly as possible, because I already know that you're the best in the business. Nobody can do it better. You pick the best team and the best components.
And we're pleased to deliver it.
I already know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very,
so now
very pleased.
let's get to it. I want the first 3 or 4 pages to give me a big picture of what you're offering that will then be proven through the rest of the program. I'm not interested in a marketing pitch, and that's what the first 10 pages of most proposals are. Why you are so great. And you need to understand that it's like you all have the same writer for those first 10 pages. And unless you make the mistake and say, the wrong person you're bidding to, which, because you all have the same writer, sometimes that actually does happen. If you at least you get, the edit changes from DHS to DOT, or from, whatever, Acme to XXX or whatever the heck it is, you all write the same first 10 pages. So I'll look at it to see if there are any neat surprises there that I didn't expect coming, but usually there's not. It's you're the greatest, you're the greatest, we should know that, and you shouldn't have to prove it. That's what the first 10 pages usually say.
All right, so yeah, you read mine then. Shlomo, you had the question.
Hi, my name is Shlomo Katz, and I'm a lawyer. I write bid protests for a living. I'm interested in the example that Nitin gave, where after the proposals were submitted, something happened, a security breach, and so now everybody, the evaluators, are interested in security. How would you decide whether, okay, the word cybersecurity is in the statement of work, so we can make that a best value discriminator, versus I think I need to go back and amend the RFP and give everyone a chance to address this new issue, which is suddenly very important. How would you evaluate that kind of question? Any of the panelists.
If somebody brought that into me, I would say, okay, show me where we're allowed to evaluate that. And if we had the situation where that you described and they couldn't, I would say then we can't count it. So we only have 2 choices. We evaluate based on what we can count, or we reissue the RFP, open discussions, do something to include that. But not everybody does that.
Right.
Okay? And that goes to this point about it depends who's making these decisions, right? There are people, and by the way, we usually have a catch-all. We usually have a catch-all. And you know what the catch-all is? Understanding of the mission. Okay? I've had protests where we'll go in and we'll say, we got a whole bunch of thresholds and objectives, right? And somebody will say, wait a minute, how come you didn't rate me outstanding? I hit all of the objectives. And I've actually been in a hearing with the GAO with a big smile on my face because I know what's coming. Well, Mr. Borkowski, didn't we exceed the objective here? Yes, you did. Didn't we exceed the objective here? Yes, you did. Didn't we exceed the objective here? Yes, we did. Well, then how come we weren't outstanding? And I'll say, well, did you read this understanding of the mission? You don't understand the mission. And we win. So it is important. It is important to understand that we do leave ourselves some latitude there on purpose. Pay very, very, very close attention to that, anything that looks like understanding of the mission in the evaluation criteria. Because you will focus on the objective things. You did or didn't meet the thresholds and objectives, because you can control those. It seems to me, watching your proposals, that you forget to look at the things that you really can't control, where you're going to rely on somebody like me making a subjective call. So normally, we've got a place to find it. Okay? Normally, it's in there, and you need to understand that. But if my evaluators can't point to something, then I will not allow them to use it.
And I want to add something to that. So, so that's why I said if you're going to put anything, transformative, you need to link back to where the hell it's connecting. So that's one thing. The other thing which I will tell you, which sort of gives you a deep insight into what is happening in an agency, and I'm surprised folks don't seem to be doing that, is to look at the IG reports of, okay? You have to read every damn IG report, and you have to read what the heck, the agency is responding to that. That's where, the tough fight is happening. And you need to understand that, and you need to know how to interpret that with transformative technologies. Because if you go out and say, IG says, hey, you know what, you're having so many security issues, and you say, oh, I can do security. Heck, every company says that. There are 40,000 contractors, all claim to be experts in cybersecurity. I know, I met at least 1,000 of them, okay? So yet DOT has problems, okay? So how the hell is it happening? They're putting so much money and something, and this is not a case only with us, it's consistently happening. So what you need to go back and look at is look at those problems, look at the kind of solutions are being sought through, and then get solutions which you show work, and you need to do that work before that RFP comes out, because as soon as the RFP comes out, everybody's shut up. I mean, nobody knows nobody can get any more information. So that's what you need to do, and I'm not sure that differentiation is happening. I don't see the effort from the contractors to find those cutting edge technologies or thinking and integrating that. I just don't see it.
Okay, we had President had a question. Marianne, you had a question before?
Hi, Marianne Lesnick from Lofell Consulting and president of the chapter. My question was, have you had the opportunity to use any of the automated compliance checking tools, and under what circumstances would you? Like Assist, I think, is one of them. Any comments on that?
I'm aware of them. We don't use them very much at this point. I think there's potential for them going forward, but haven't made much use of them at this point.
From a DoD perspective, we haven't used them. There's probably a lot of opportunity for it. There's investments that would have to be made to ensure that they're reliable, but we don't currently use them.
Yeah, I want to answer that in a different manner. So, so the Office of Personnel Management uses an HR system to sort of get resumes to employees. I haven't really found that to be very effective. I mean, if you sort of see what comes to you, what gets selected. So I mean, my confidence in something like that would probably be low unless somebody can prove it to us that the thing works. And so without showing that, and again, I don't know how you sort of get that experience. How do you get cultural fit? There are things which are implicit that a source selection committee is doing, which, for all practical purposes, I'm not sure how you train such a system.
What the organization learned was that when they used a proposal evaluation tool, that they had to align their instructions with their evaluation criteria.
Okay. So we'll get one over here, and I'll go over there. Yes.
So that's unfortunate, and certainly I don't see that happening at NASA because we are very strictly, we have people who do that very well for us, having written both the L and M sections and having them come back and say they don't align and no. So it helps if you don't know what you're doing. I guess the point is if you do, I'll just tell a story about HR. I know of, we use that too, and the person applied for the job they were doing, of course, they didn't get the job because the computer said you're not qualified, even though they were. I mean, and everybody knew it. But you have to be careful about computers. As a computer person, I can tell you that.
But I think there's utility in these, particularly as you build up a workforce for skill. I wouldn't ever rely on it, but I wouldn't mind having it as a complement. So the issue for us at this point is, okay, that looks like it's got some potential. We'd like to do it. And by the way, I don't know if IBM's tying Watson into it, right? They are, literally, they are. And that's sort of interesting because it gets to the point about how do you get it to think through these kind of problems. I think we'd like to have it. The question is, how much is it worth for us to have that complement at this point in time? Sometime it may be worth it. Right now, it's kind of down on the bottom of the list.
Yeah. So I spoke at the UAV conference yesterday, and they were doing some demonstrations of some of the crazy things you can do with a UAV and where they can fly, because they have 5 or 6 different sensors, and they're constantly calculating based on all their performance parameters and the geolocation. And they said, we're going to look back 20 years from now, and we're going to say, back then they actually let people fly airplanes? Can you imagine that? So, we have to look at how we integrate these transformative technologies in various cases. We actually have a question here. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi. I have a question about the elephant in the room. So we haven't talked about cost at all.
It was on my list.
Good. So I'm one of those writers that likes to say, we're pleased to and things like that. So
extremely pleased to.
Yeah. And I'm a consultant, so I've done several of these for different companies. And in my experience, the proposals really divide up, and I do services, sorry, so it's not cameras and features, so I'll say that. And they divide up in 2 different groups. So there is the incumbent who says, oh, be scared of change. You just want us because you want your incumbent staff and you want to keep them. And you want everything status quo because we've been doing this wonderful job for 5 years. And there's everybody else who's saying, oh, you need change. You don't want the status quo, but we'll capture all of the incumbent staff and bring them right back to you. So ultimately, is the cost, does it become a differentiator, and then the value, trade-off proposal? And that's what I'd like for everyone, if possible, I'm curious, because I do believe every agency looks at it differently. So I'd like to hear about costs, even the best value proposals, and how important is it really, honestly?
Okay, and I had a corollary question to that. You can answer at the same time if you want. Somebody said, so when you're looking at maybe an LTPA and you look at in the costs, do you ever look at the other? Do you ever look at the technical when you're looking at it?
So can I take that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I have a thought on how that should be addressed, which you can actually address LPTA and actually be in a good position. Okay, and so again, I'm talking mainly from a technology perspective as a CIO. So obviously, cost is important for us because we get a lot of unfunded mandates, and you go to Congress and they say you have a lot of money, Nitin, go out, figure some savings, go out and do this. I mean, that keeps on happening. So we need to get more stuff done with lower cost. So cost is always an issue. I will say there are a couple of other issues there that people don't realize. Speed to execution is a very critical issue in IT, because I know that if I leave and the next CIO comes or the administration changes, if my system is not in there, there are all kinds of things that could happen to that. Okay, so I was there. I was trying to make sure that, whatever I'm doing, I'm trying to get those changes in when I was there, not just plan about them, but actually execute them. So execution of those is really important. Plus the regular maintenance and upgrade, that becomes a very critical issue. So it's really cost, it's really execution, speed of execution, maintenance and upgrade. And I actually had, in DOT used to have something like, I had something called happiness index. I was trying to figure out why sometimes the customers were happy and sometimes they were not. And they're relating to all those 4 things. So let me go back to your question and sort of answer it. So the main issue that I sort of see is if we put out an RFP, and again, if we go out and demand every step, then it becomes much more complicated. But if you actually put out a statement of objectives, there's an opportunity for you to add a number of very specialized commercial off-the-shelf solutions. Each time you add a very specific targeted transformative product solution in it, that reduces the cost of the overall system dramatically. If you can add 20, 30, 40% in terms of products into that solution, you'll be 10% cheaper than almost anybody else. What that means, of course, is you need to think through where you are going. You need to align yourself with the right kind of products. You need to have a system for doing that. I mean, we consistently started doing that at DOT. I mean, my company now, we spend time on doing these things. We have found a lot of success in it. So it is possible to get your prices down substantially, yet deliver high value, yet give you the differentiation that you need.
Well, let me I think that can be true, but actually I think, first of all, if you wrote me a proposal like that, you'd lose. And let me tell you why. You didn't answer the RFP. You got in a pissing contest with your competitor, okay? And if I catch you doing that, I'm going to throw you out because I am interested in how you are going to answer the RFP. Also, there are clearly people in the government, and if we catch them, we stop them. But there are people who say, I really like my incumbent. I'm going to try, you know, and they have this bias. Or I hate my incumbent. We try to stop that. But I'll tell you where I am. I don't care if you're the incumbent or not. Here's what happens with incumbents. They assume I know what they meant. It kills their proposals. I will not give them credit for the fact that I've worked with them for a bunch of years and I will not fill in the lines. So oftentimes, believe it or not, it does come down to understanding the mission. Which one of these people in their proposal, and in the tenor of your question tends to be personnel who are supporting me. That's where, because you talked about, you know, getting people replaced with the same people, and that's where that happens most often. But I told you what I'm going to value. I don't believe any of that crap, right? That's a standard template boilerplate statement. Well, yeah, well, maybe you will, maybe you won't. But what did I tell you I was going to evaluate? I told you I was going to evaluate key personnel. Do you think there are distinctions among key personnel? There sure as hell are. If I tell you that I want you to support me, implement my strategic vision, do you think that different proposals indicate better or less understanding of what that means? They sure as heck do. So in best value, which is what you're talking about, those things are the discriminators, which I will then evaluate against the cost differences. So don't write me a proposal that gets in a war with your competitor. Write me a proposal that tells you how you're going to knock my socks off doing what I asked you to do. And if I told you that key personnel is a discriminator, you pay attention to that because that's what we're looking at. That's how we make best value decisions.
In general?
You're mostly talking to services, and I'm not a big services person. So I know that most of what I deal with, and even in my services, is off of an IDIQ, you know, which is itself, in my mind, it's mostly how's the company and not the cost. But this is I'm not talking now as the selecting official or such. I think that really, when you're talking about services, that should be more important because the fact is, at some point, the costs can't be that much different. I mean, and if they are, you almost have to ask why. And then, you know, if it's that much lower, you're probably missing something. You're going to have to change it later. And when people are surprised by that, I'm like, well, how can you be surprised if you're asking to build a software product and it takes 6 months to build it? It takes 6 months, and if you change it, you know, I think. Personally, I think the government probably puts too much on this idea that that there's a lot of cost differentiation alone that should be the difference. There's a lot of people differentiation in companies and how they handle things and how they do things that I think should be more important. That's a personal opinion. It doesn't really affect how the government's going to eventually do the lowest price anyway.
We haven't. We bought services contracts on best value. That was not the lowest price.
Sir?
To just answer your question regarding the incumbent, I think the government, that boy has cried wolf too many times now. I think we've all heard the scares of, well, if I'm not, you know, in place, then you're going to lose continuity of service. And I think it's been proven that we don't necessarily lose continuity of service. The workforce will shift as required. So for those that are incumbents, I think you need to identify, differentiate yourself, those key personnel that you're going to retain, really, again, show why that resume is so important to our mission and why that person's going to stay on board. For those that are the competitors, the workforce is maybe going to move with you if you can get the right agreements in place. So that isn't necessarily our concern either. It's when you start to commodify your workforce that you really run into the problem of now everything is viewed simply as cost. So if you're allowing your workforce to become commoditized, then you really need to figure out a way to differentiate them. I've noticed that we've gone away from a standard practice that the contractors would identify themselves with company logos and things like that. Now everyone's kind of blending in seamlessly. My personal opinion is I don't think that helps to differentiate yourself. Although maybe you might have a different view on that, but I think the government kind of looks at how are you different, and branding is an important part of that. So not allowing your workforce to become commodified is really, really a critical part. If you're an incumbent, you can't get lazy. You still have to identify, why you're still important, why we still need you versus somebody else. So it's a highly competitive arrangement that we have. The work, we used to just compete materials or commodities. Now really, intellectual property or intellectual property is now almost competed as a commodity as well. So you really have to be creative in how you look at your workforce and articulating that to the government. Because cost, at that point, it is all about cost. If we're just looking at you as your folks as a commodity.
I want to add something to this. So in a couple of interesting experiences, so again, as I said, I met a lot of companies. A lot of companies would come out and say, I know, Nathan, I know you're going to have this particular contract expire next year, but that's already done, it's taken. It's like, I'm the CIO, I don't even know who the hell is going to get it. We have not even thought about when we are going to put it out, and you're already declaring to me that it's all done and it's all settled. So sometimes some of these discussions are more in the thoughts of people versus actually what's happening. And I must tell you, with incumbents, yes, there's a familiarity, and sometimes familiarity is not a good thing, because as we know, they can be doing great work or they may not be doing great work, and both of those points. So I would not give a big, certainly, as I said, as you agree, we are making everything clear to make sure that that is not anywhere in the deciding factor or anywhere in the selection activity. I think and at least for DOT, I can tell you, they were free and open. They were completely out there. We are looking at fresh activities. We are looking at innovation. And so I think you should go out and give a serious try and make a really good proposal that delivers value and shows value, because sometimes you just saying that it gives value doesn't mean anything. You need to step by step connect and show that, and that's where I think the difference happens.
Very good. Okay, so wow, a lot to absorb. Before we go into a lightning round with 2 pearls of wisdom, 2 takeaways from each of you to try and encapsulate what your advice would be so that we all can work together to do a better job of helping your customers, the citizens of America and the warfighters, and how we can support them. I'm going to go and turn it around back to remembering the mission, and I want to just recognize, everybody knows that is in panel discussion with me, that I always want to take an opportunity to thank those that put on their uniform, so I can wear this uniform and keep us safe, so we have the freedoms that we enjoy and that we're all working so hard to protect. So veterans in the room, if you could kindly stand so we could recognize you, please. And that includes ones on stage as well. Woo, 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 woo. Thank you so much. And then, of course, behind them is a whole army or platoon of a family and friends that keep them, focused so they can do what they have to do. And sometimes, our job is a lot harder. But I'd like to recognize families of veterans and current service people. If you guys could stand as well for me, please. Husbands, wives, please stand. Thank you, and again, thank you from all of us. We really appreciate what you do. So if we could just have a quick lightning round and just 1 or 2 pearls of wisdom, the takeaways that help us understand how we can do a better job of engaging, cooperating, communicating, working together on our common mission, our common goal to serve the soldiers and citizens of America. Sir?
Well, again, a couple. One is understand how what you offer is helping the mission. If you can do that, that's going to really help you with your proposals. Second thing is this. Communication is important. Got to find the right time. I have people who come into me and, we do debriefings very, because, you bring in lawyers trying to get the time that I say the instead of so you can protest on the basis I said the and not That's not the time really to have a good interactive discussion. However, I have had bidders say to me, well, when we get past the protest period, can we go out for a cup of coffee? That's a really good time to have a conversation, because many of us in the government are eager to have that conversation when the environment is not nearly as threatening and when we don't have to worry about what we say being taken out of context. And I think that can help people build better proposals.
Great, excellent.
So I want to watch for the green light. So to take the other time to do communication we haven't talked about is the draft RFP. Please make use of that. And I used to really make that a big point, because in C4 we had one question and nobody asked about something that was wrong. They all just said, well, I thought somebody else would. I didn't want to say anything. It's like, if you told us, we would have changed it. But we're not perfect. The draft RFP is our time for you to tell us what's wrong and right, and so please make use of that. Soup 5, we had 2,000 questions. So you did a good job, the industry. But we also, it helped us hone the RFP down. So don't look at it as a scary time to communicate. Look at it as a good time to communicate. That's the time to let us know what we're doing. Again, it's not. Don't look for hidden meetings. Don't look for we have somebody picked out. We're just people. We sometimes write we should have said tell us we did that. If you don't tell us, we're not going to know.
Thank you so much.
Well, one pearl, it would be share, shape, and show. And that's share what you know about industry.
3 pearls.
No, it's one.
Only one of them's a pearl, the other two
One
aren't.
combined. One thought. Let me correct that then, please. Thank you. Share what you know from your industry experience. Don't assume that government understands industry practice. You might be able to really shape that business arrangement. Be involved. When I say shape, be involved all the way beyond just the funding dropping and the requirement being thrown over to the contracting office. Find points of where you can intersect and interact with them from requirement generation all the way through to contract award. And that will shape the contract. That will have an effect on what kind of contract type might be presented to you, or what kind of evaluation we might be, whether it's best value or under the best value continuum, LPTA. You have an opportunity to influence that by shaping it. And then show. In your proposals, show us specifically, where that resume is going to benefit us in our mission, in our innovation, or where that product or service is going to benefit us in that, and tie it directly to a work breakdown structure if you need to. Graphics are great, but they can't answer, one picture can't say 1,000 words in that case. You need to be able to also put some words to it as well. Graphics do help, though. They definitely do help. So that's what just share, shape, and show, okay?
All right, 3 pearls.
Yes. So, there are lots of things which I would love to share and talk and sort of understand your experiences. Would love to connect with each and every one of y'all. And the simplest way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. If you're interested, you can connect with me. You can sort of send some of your thoughts on how you're working, and we could always exchange and have discussions. So I encourage y'all to do that. I mean, we talked a lot about innovation and transformation and how you get in. My company does a lot of work in that. Our model is very unique. We actually have what we call a 3-legged stool. What we do is we try and understand recurring government problems. So that's what we do. And then we find transformative product technologies, mainly from high-growth companies. And then we actually work with system integrators and proposal writers to get these technologies integrated into proposals so they are actually delivered to the customer. So we are doing that regularly. We are getting great interest from the government as well as from the system integration community. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. Look at some of those kind of things. And as I said, if there's one thing that I would say is really understand the mission of that organization and then figure out how you can transform that to something much, much better using technology or whatever other services you provide.
Thank you so much. And thank you, all of you, for helping transform our knowledge and understanding to do a better job to work together.